versus some sort of Naya Zoo variant. It's actually really cool. Features, well, I'll show you what it features, but I ended up losing the die roll since I'm extremely unlucky. Extremely unlucky. I'm very unlucky. And this would be the first game. I guess I should go over my deck list like I always do. I did make a couple of changes. So, took this deck to my local game store last Wednesday and went 1-1-2. Had 2 ties. Now previously I had the same main deck, except Welding Jar was in the sideboard and had been replaced by Mishra's Bauble. Mechanized Production was just gone, and that was a third Collective Brutality, which is also in the sideboard. And I had made a couple of minor changes to the mana base. So I ended up going to my local game store and tying my first 2 matches because my opponents didn't really realize what kind of deck I was on, and they refused to concede. Now the first one, my opponent didn't really have a right to concede, to keep going with that. I mean, you always have a right to play out the game, but they had no outs. But the second match was versus Living End, and they tried stockpiling on Cyclers so that they could inevitably draw their Beast Within and destroy my Ensnaring Bridge, and it almost worked. That was an extremely tense game, and the third game that I played was also an extremely tense game. And you know what? Even though you technically don't need a win condition, something like this would have just made my life so much easier. And a lot of people are talking about, here, let me size that up. A lot of people are talking about how if you play deck well enough, then you don't need a win condition, and that's true. If you play fast enough, if your opponent plays fast enough, you don't need a win condition. However, imagine the scenario in which you go to a Grand Prix and you're playing 11 or 12 or however many matches, or 14 or 16 or however many matches a Grand Prix has over the span of 2 days. Do you really want to play every single game out all the way through? And a lot of your opponents will be salty, and they'll be like, I don't want to lose to this BS deck. It's just so janky and so controlling and so prison-like. It's almost as bad as losing to Stasis, except at least in Stasis, you can draw your cards. But with playing Lantern, you can't even draw your cards. It's just like, my goodness. So I included a win condition. That way I can just do the bare minimum, focusing on what my opponent's doing, and just focus on my own deck. Focus on digging for my win condition and finding it once the lock is established. It's a lot less stressful than just going through the motions of trying to figure out, oh, if my opponent draws this, then I need to have a contingency plan. It's just so much easier just to say, you know what, slap this on a Codex Shredder and just win the game in a few turns. It's a lot easier. Also made a couple of changes to my sideboard. Noticed 2 Welding Jar because the third one's in the main deck. Tormod's Crypt because I noticed that a lot of my decks that I was seeing at the local game store had some reliance on the graveyard, and Tormod's Crypt is just so nice. I mean, you could do Relic of Progenitus, but popping it draws you a card, and it exiles your own graveyard too, even though it doesn't target, which I guess could be relevant. You could do Rest in Peace, but again, exiles your own graveyard. You could do Nihil Spellbomb, but that's basically Tormod's Crypts that cost mana instead of doesn't cost mana. I also added in Noxious Revival. Thinker's tests on Noxious Revival proved extremely promising. I did not like replacing Spellskite with Noxious Revival, so I just ended up using one of my unused slots in the sideboard and putting this in there. I think that this would be a great complement to Spellskite, but not necessarily a replacement. And of course, Duress, Collective Brutality, all those cards still in the sideboard. I still swear by Ancient Grudge, still swear by Ray of Revelation. Ray of Revelation has saved me with that flashback so many times. But basically, those are all the changes that I've made. It's slower. Lost a Mishra's Bauble, lost a Collective Brutality. So the main deck is a bit slower, but I think that that'll be more than made up for with the aggro matches and the fact that I still have the 1-2 punch of Lantern into Welding Jar or Mishra's Bauble into Opal, into either discard or a Mill Rock or something like that, followed by turn 2 Ensnaring Bridge if I have it. Which does come up, turn 2 Ensnaring Bridge does come up, and it's just, oh, it's like one of those busted affinity draws where you play Vault Scourge, Ornithopter, 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 Opal, and then second turn, Cranial Plating, swing on Vault Scourge. It's just so delicious. But anyway, enough about this. It's enough rambling. This is, again, 2-0 versus some sort of Naya Zoo variant, and I just love decks that have Experiment 1 in them. They're just so amazing. Okay, well, here we go. So, initial hands. I'm looking at this hand, and I'm seeing no colored sources. I have 2 colored spells. I have no lantern, so I can't dig for colored spells. And I got 2 lands, and I could land Ensnaring Bridge, but there's really no point to doing that if there's really no point to landing Ensnaring Bridge if I can't get those cards out of my hand, so gotta ship it. And in this one, I keep, they give me free information, which is nice. I love seeing Experiment 1 gets bigger, which means it usually will make itself too big for Ensnaring Bridge to handle. And here we go. Now, I didn't have anything else to take advantage of this 2 mana on turn 1 thing, but I do have turn 2 Ensnaring Bridge, which comes in pretty handy against this version, against this particular deck. Alright, and here they just pump out a couple of things. They do shock themselves for Foundry, that while Nacatl, I say Nacatl, ends up pumping Experiment 1, and I take 2 damage here. And here I end up drawing a land, and I have one of those feel-good moments. Oh, bless you. Turn 2 Ensnaring Bridge. It's just so good. Delicious. And at this point, my opponent is basically out of options. I mean, they could Magma Jet into more action if they want to, but I'm lowering this bridge very quickly. And I know that Welding Jar isn't necessary, but it feels good to have that extra security in the main deck, especially if you're playing any sort of a Jund or Grixis or Mardu or Obzon or anything that has destruction spells for non-creatures. It just feels nice to have that Welding Jar in there so that you can save yourself from an Abrupt Decay if you need to. And here they're just fetching for a land to play Tarmogoyf, and I dump my hand. And they draw Vexing Devil, hit me with Magma Spray so that they can get the Scry. And they don't see anything they like with the Scry, apparently, so they just ask to go to Game 2. So, Game 2. I'll walk you through my sideboarding techniques again. Let me see if I can find the right one. Okay, so I don't remember exactly, but if I were to recreate my sideboard plan, probably would have been Pithing Needle out, Mechanized Production out, Surgical out, probably Thoughtseize out as well, leaving me a lot of cards, and I would have brought in Welding Jar, Spellskites, Leyline, probably Collective Brutality, and something else. Probably Noxious Revival, because why not? I would have probably gone with something like that. Now, that's probably not my exact sideboard plan that I did in this match, but it's probably something close. And here my opponent is going first. And I don't know if I actually ever said that I was going to keep this. Again, they're kind of rushing that. But here we go again with that busted turn 1, 2 mana. You can do Lantern into Stirrings, Lantern into Inquisition, just depending on what you see on the top of the deck. Or you can do Lantern into Pixis. that flexibility of having 2 mana on turn 1, it doesn't come up that often, but when it does come up, it's just so good. So here I wait to see what the top deck is before making a decision. Yeah, I have to tell my opponents how to do it on occasion. So nothing on the top that I particularly want. No real need to put Pixis in play, so I just use Inquisition, and I think I take Hellspark Elemental, or do I take Vexing Devil? I think I take Vexing Devil. Because at this point I don't have a bridge, and I don't want to take the 4 damage from that. I mean, I guess I could. I mean, Hellspark would technically do 6 damage, plus whatever damage Experiment 1 would give. So I guess that wasn't the most ideal play. I should have taken Hellspark Elemental. But then Hellspark Elemental would have just come in anyway, and I would have taken 4 from Vexing Devil as opposed to 3 from... Yeah, I guess it was more profitable to take Vexing Devil in that case. And here they go with the Hellspark Elemental beatdown. This is a really nice interaction. I love this interaction. It's a 2 mana 3/1 trample haste. Just sacrifice it. But Experiment 1 doesn't care if you sacrifice it in a turn. It just cares that it has greater power. So Experiment 1 will grow. And I draw the Ghost Quarter here. See Spellskite on top. Really love it. Again, 2 mana on turn 1, 3 mana on turn 2. That acceleration is beautiful. And I happen to find this Ensnaring Bridge. Now I don't take advantage of this acceleration on the second turn, but I do take advantage of the acceleration on the third turn. And at this point I'm getting real close to locking my opponent out just by finding that Ensnaring Bridge right there. And here they go, unearthing Hellspark Elemental. I guess you don't need to see this because you can see the hand. Leaving a 3 table, and I'm at 9 life, but I'm about to stabilize here. And at this point, my opponent just concedes the game, citing the fact that they've only got 19 mana sources in their deck, but they did hitting 4 of them in the 4 or 5 of them in the 10 or so cards that they had, which, I mean, it is kind of unfortunate in that case, but nah. I mean, I guess that's just variance. I did get a little bit lucky in this match, I suppose. And just my hand. Game grinds on. Rakdos Charm is nice tech, by the way. Nice tech. And they grab 2 Vexing Devils because they don't have anything else in their deck that they can realistically fetch. Alright, and that's game. Thanks for watching.